Back in the saddle, episode 5 of Ramble On, and my co-host here is Deputy Mayor Todd Redwood. Todd, welcome aboard.
Well, thank you very much, Sam. Good to be back again.
It's always a treat to have you. We've got a bit to cover because it's been we skipped a fortnight, so we have some news out of the previous council meeting. There's also been quite a bit of activity that councillors have had on, so we've got an action-packed show this week.
It's been a busy month, hasn't it?
It has.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll open the batting with just our local strategic planning statement. I'll just give a bit of an overview of that because it's something that sounds fairly boring, and but it's something that councils need to have. And Armidale, I think, has had a bit of a cut and paste one in the past, but it's never really been signed off. But for our listeners out there, our local strategic planning statement, it's effectively our 20-year vision of where we're going to end up, how we're going to get there. And call it a bit of a roadmap to growth. But the important thing about that strategic planning statement is we need to get sign-off by the state government that they agree with it. So there's various departments in the state government that will determine whether they agree with our growth projections and how we're going to get there, where are these jobs going to come from. So once that's achieved, and we're going through that process now with the government, once that's achieved, we'll be probably be considered winners in their eyes, and that's an important thing.
And it's probably worth mentioning that without that, or without a solid LSPS, local strategic planning statement, then it's likely that any of the progress that we'd like to make, like some of the, we've actually looked for some developments around the region over the last 18 months that we've been in office in council, and there are a few of those have been knocked back because the LSPS just wasn't strong enough or didn't give the narrative to the state government about what we were trying to do. That's
right. In the state government's eyes, we were seen as a stagnating region, and therefore we weren't getting any of the goodies, the funding, the attention that state governments lavish. So,
what are some of the things that it's going to include?
Look, key to that are employment areas. So we've identified a couple of potential areas for industrial parks, also more intensive horticulture, not just around Guyra, but east of Armidale as well. So there's a few interesting bits and pieces there. And what's important in that regard is it gives certainty to people moving here that, look, okay, there will be employment lands if we're going to build sheds. Tied into it, and it's probably worth throwing to this as well, is the housing strategy. So I might throw to you, Todd, to give us a bit of an overview of...
Yeah, well, of course, when you need a increasing population, and we've led with that with jobs, so those employment areas that you're talking about and those particular industries that we'll be focusing on need people. And so we project that over that roughly 20-year period with the increased population, we're going to need around 8,500 new housing lots to house the approximately 20,000 extra people. And so
I'll ask a question as though I weren't in the room, but you can answer it. So it's a bit of one of these Dorothy Dixes. Was it difficult to find 8,500 lots?
Well, I think we were led to believe it would be, but actually when we worked carefully with the planners and of course some of the surveyors as well that do the overlays, but they mapped it out and put in all of the impediments to growth, and we actually found some fairly significant lots around the place. Some of the impediments had been council-led impediments where previous councils over the last several decades had put in place some sort of restrictions, and of course there are other impediments or blockers like flood zones and fire zones and koala protection zones and those kind of things. But you peel them back and have a look, and there were actually 3 major areas around Armidale and one significant area around Guyra where there's growth. Plus there's also the organic growth that can be made in the villages.
Yep, indeed. And those blocks of land, they're not all, or actually the majority aren't council owned either, though it's about reclassifying existing privately held land.
That's right, yeah. So a lot of the land around the region has been, I guess, tied up from development because of different restrictions that have been put in place, and it'll be a matter of reclassifying, like you said, and allowing that development to take place, not to create a whole lot of little boxes on the hillside, but to actually create some quite livable places around.
So what's going to make things livable? Anything in the housing strategy that would indicate that we're not just boxing everything together and creating ghettos?
Well, there's certainly the encouragement of sustainable housing, and it was only last week that I was at a promotional piece where we were looking at one of the houses that was being built in Armidale. It was actually being extended, so it was a very old place. It was being extended and done in a very sustainable way, and through council we're putting in place some incentives for people to do that in a sustainable way. Some people think it's a bit more expensive to make something sustainable up front, but ultimately the running costs of the house, when you talk about energy costs and all the others down the track, it can be a good saver. So there's that. There's also building for size. So not everything has to be huge. Land size could be large, but the house itself doesn't need to be huge. I guess it's putting in place a house that's appropriate for what people want to live in, not necessarily some enormous McMansion, Western Sydney style.
Actually, interesting, just house size, and we think about block size. The current minimum lot size here in Armidale is 500 square metres.
That's right.
There's a push, and all of this is going to go out in public exhibition as well, but there was a push for, and it will appear in there, that certainly in the existing township, that can be reduced to 450 square metres.
Yeah.
Anything behind that?
Well, I think, and when we talked about that, and I did hear, something as small as 400 square metres mooted as a proposal for the right type of development, where the community that lives in that type of development would have all the necessary facilities and amenity required, so that 500 might actually be too large. But that's also, as you said, it's within the existing township. Yeah,
and look, it was to do with the capacity for infill, because some of the blocks in town are 900 square metres. So if they wanted to subdivide and build a battle axe, that's doable. But the infill, the maths just doesn't really stack up.
Yeah, we've had a look at that, and we had some advice on that as well. And financially, it just doesn't stack up to do mass infill. It does for what they call salt and pepper infill, where mum and dad want to cut off a piece of their land, like you said, in a battle axe situation, or subdivide somehow, but otherwise not en masse.
No, we won't see a lot.
And the knockdown rebuild style that we know about in some of the metropolitan centres, it just doesn't stack up here well.
No. Probably also worth adding that just with that housing and the potential new lots, those 8,500, they were well in excess of the minimum lot size. In fact, I think they were calculating about 650 to 700, because the developers tell us that's the sweet spot. You need a bigger block of land. That's why you live in the regions.
Yeah, people, the ones that will be ideally moving here probably want a bit more space than they can get in the larger cities where they may have been living before. So I think that's it's good news that we've been able to find that many lots at that size. They're basically sitting waiting to happen.
And whilst it's not green at the moment, there's an element of green space here.
Yeah, part of the design of that expansion is that there be no house that's more than 400 metres away from a green space, or a public green space. So that's very exciting, as well as being connected to the CBD and other facilities around town through cycleways and walking tracks. So it's a very well thought through plan, and one that will evolve over time.
I think it's going to come before council, if not this month, perhaps next month, and then it'll be on public exhibition. So for all you listeners out there, there will be the opportunity for people to comment on both the housing strategy and the strategic planning statement. We really welcome the feedback there, so that we're all on, a similar page about where we're headed and why.
Yeah, look, I think it's really exciting, and it certainly buoyed me to realise that we have that much space to be able to grow, to meet our growth projections and plans. So, terrific.
What people might notice when they read it is that there are a few bullet points in there that give us scope to explore other things. So it doesn't go down to the detail of a new swimming facility or specifics like bike paths, etc. But there are statements in there that really allow us to, where appropriate, put some serious planning into amenities, new things that we might want that are all consistent with that planning statement.
Yeah, really, really good stuff. Probably could move on to the next piece, which is something that we talked about at the last council meeting. You might want to open up a little bit about the future fund.
And it's probably consistent with amenity as well. So this has been mooted and floated around, but at the last council meeting back at the end of September, councillors were given an update just on the progress of a future fund for Armidale. And why this is important is that with the renewable energy zone coming to the fore, what we've been able to negotiate, and this has been mentioned on these podcasts before, is that the proponents, those building a new wind or solar or pumped hydro scheme, will contribute 1.5% to the community, and that'll go into a future fund. So it's really important to understand
1.5% of their capital build cost.
That's right. So it'll run into the tens of millions of dollars by the time that the renewable energy zone has been completed. But it's important to understand that money is separate to council's ongoing revenue, the consolidated revenue, the day to day, and that. The idea behind the Future Fund, and this is key, and this is what really got the state government across the line, was it's about intergenerational benefit. So the renewable energy zone, look, there are people that are for it and against it. My view is it's coming. We need to make the most of it. That's what a responsible council will do. We see the Future Fund as the vehicle to make the most of it, and those funds will go in. They'll be separate to council funds. There'll be a board of governors that oversee it. It'll be invested sensibly, and it's the income from that future fund, the annual income that comes out, that we can use to build the amenities. Now,
and how do we propose to decide on what those amenities are?
Well, there'll be a few things. Some are going to be, I guess, council-led initiatives. I mentioned a moment ago a new swimming pool, but a classic example here is that we hear in Armidale is a hydrotherapy pool. And one of the reasons why we weren't able to get that hydrotherapy pool despite receiving some funding is that council wasn't able to make the co-contribution. So the income from this future fund could go towards co-contributions for, example, the hydrotherapy pool. So council would want to have control over where some of that is spent, but really strict guidelines about it being amenities, not going into the business as usual stuff. Yeah. There'd also be a portion of that funding put aside for a community panel, for want of a better term, to determine, and that could run into $1 million plus each year, where that community panel might receive submissions from various groups around the community, and be it a tennis club wanting new fences like we had up at Black Mountain this weekend, Todd. But those sorts of on the ground projects, we'd have a community panel making that determination.
So like a very meaningful amount of money to be able to give grants to.
That's right, and I think the key there is meaningful. So that's that's a really positive thing that future fund.
Just to circle back to the future fund itself, you were talking about that, and I mean, some people might not be familiar with the concept of a future fund, but not touching the principle is the key there.
That is,
right?
Absolutely. So we'd actually see that corpus or that principle growing in time, and it'll be up to the board of governors to determine of the income that's generated, how much is reinvested and how much is released for distributions, so that long after you and I are gone, not just from council, but from gone, to the big council in the sky, that that future fund will keep ticking on. And with that in place, that'll make our region unique.
Yeah,
we'll be able to kick on. It'll be the first time, I think, that a regional council has had serious off-farm income, and that can perpetuate. And by serious, I mean that's it's big ticket,
big money, isn't it?
Big money,
which will benefit generations.
Yeah. Now, speaking of amenity, Todd, the airport. A few things up there.
Yes, well, it's great that we're going to have a cafe opening again at last. So there's been quite a hiatus with the cafe at the airport, and it's not gone unnoticed for a lot of people, me included, who travels a fair bit through there, and not being able to get a coffee or a sandwich or something like that as you pass through. But exciting news.
So who's the new proponent, and when are they moving in?
Yeah, the alternate route, who a lot of people know from Uralla, a successful cafe down there, took up that challenge, and they'll be opening there from the 1st of November. So it's not long now, a couple of weeks away.
Now, one of the highlights of last podcast was Mythbusters.
I do love to
you do love to bust a myth. So
yeah.
let me put a myth to you. It was mooted that the previous cafe was forced out because council insisted that they could only work in these 2-hour shifts when planes are there. Does that sound real or not?
Yeah, I don't think that one's real. So I believe that, it's my understanding, and this happened before our term in council, but it was in the middle of a global pandemic, and I think that when the airport shut down for flights because of the necessary restrictions that were put in place on travel, that cafe folded at that time, and it's been laying dormant, empty ever since. So I'm not sure that it was a council-led thing. I think that there are certainly no restrictions put on the length of time that can be worked. I think there is some level of restriction about opening, as in, the cafe needs to be open when there are flights, but I don't think there's any limitation to. You can probably open 24 hours a day, realistically.
We'll call that one busted. So let's move to a mythlet. Then with the cafe, and that is that the current council had nothing to do with the alternate route coming in. Did they just?
They just floated in there. Right. Well, that's untrue too. So we did have an expression of interest, and that was a lengthy process. The expression of interest ended up, the initial one fell over, and we went back out to the population of suitable vendors around the region, and the alternate route came up through that process, and through our processes. Now we've been able to successfully sign the alternate route up, and that's great. That's where they are. So definitely a council-led initiative.
With them opening on the 1st of November.
That's right.
Actually, just on the airport, there was bad news.
Well, I was
Rex.
going to ask you about that. Rex, did you have something to say about that?
I did. Look, it is disappointing. We have to take Rex at face value. So they're ceasing their Armidale flights at the end of this month. Their statement said that they will reassess the situation. So they cited, actually they were quite harsh, but they cited lack of or poaching of pilots, so lack of pilots to fly the Saabs, and difficulty getting parts. Now, their statement said, and the communications we've had with them, is that they'll reassess that situation next year, and if it's resolved itself or turned itself around by the 31st of March next year, then they'll be back in the air. So, it's nothing we can force, but fingers crossed they
well, let's hope return. That they do return, and what we see on face value is reality.
Is reality, yeah. So, certainly in that space, competition is key. Monopolies aren't great for the wider community. Todd, bit of good news. Some green shoots. What's happening around town? Yeah,
there's a couple of new businesses around town. We've seen the opening of the Welder's Dog, or the new one down in the west.
Eastern side of
Beatty Street.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's good. I'm not sure that it's operating every day of the week at the moment, but it's certainly a great space.
It is a great space, and look, for the council listeners out there, you probably already know, but that's where this year's council Christmas party will be. Yeah,
so good to support a new business in town. And we also noticed that there's a new clothing store open in Richardson's Arcade.
Yep.
Just, I think it was on Saturday, that it opened. So it's quite RB sellers. So
good things are happening. I noticed in the world of sport, the World Endurance Mountain Bike Organisation, or WEMBO, are having their 24-hour solo races here now. This apparently, for those in mountain bike circles, assure me it's a big deal. They're held at different venues around the world every year, and it's Australia's turn, and Armidale got the nod. So that'll be out at UNE the 4th and 5th of November.
And will you be competing?
Look, I won't. They could hand me the wooden spoon now. I have done a 24-hour mountain bike race, but it certainly wasn't solo.
Yeah, it looks very grueling, but yeah, great that we've got it here. So and
is.
You know, it's I guess it's testament to the fact that we've got facilities that are up to that level.
Yeah, that's right. And look, if we were to put the bigger picture hat on and speaking mountain biking, you know, one of the great options would be is the great tinderbox that is the pine forest, for that to be reactivated as another world-class mountain biking track would be a great thing. And I think there's some moves internally to start that conversation. Whilst the pine forest is run by New South Wales Forestries, they seem to have all but abandoned it.
And it probably goes back to something we spoke about in the last podcast that I did with you, but we were talking about tourism and the whole trend from destination tourism to experience tourism, and that's part of that's key, isn't it?
Yeah. And with the weather warming up, this is when, you know, town becomes fun, Todd. We've got Halloween. Tell us about that. You're once again the face of Halloween. You know, as the least attractive man on council, that's the reason they've chosen you.
Halloween ambassador. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the one that looks like the pumpkin. So 27th of October, we're going to be celebrating that in the mall like we did last year. So, you know, really encourage people to join in the festivities there between 4 and 8 p.m. Come down, dress up.
It was a cracking event last year.
I unfortunately wasn't in the country for it, so I missed Halloween last year. My family went along.
Brilliant. I reckon 2,500 people. I've never seen them all pumping like that.
Yeah,
It's as though we were giving away free lollies. Because we were giving away free lollies. But it was brilliant. And, you know, big hats off to our activation team for the work they did last year.
Yeah.
The different... getting the vendors involved, but also the entertainment that was mooching through the crowds. It was brilliant.
Yeah, by everything that I've heard, probably the most successful mall event that's been held.
And to be bettered by this year, so
right.
bigger, better and spookier.
So encourage everyone to get down there on the 27th of October.
Yeah, that'll be great. Hold my hand, Todd. That's not a request, but tell me about it.
Yeah, hold my hand. So there's a series of signs being put up in prominent locations around Armidale and Guyra, and it's part of a campaign that was put together by the Little Blue Dinosaur Foundation, and that was sadly the woman who set that up, Michelle McLaughlin, lost her 4-year-old son in a pedestrian car accident, or pedestrian versus car accident, when they were on holidays on the Central Coast, and her son's name was Tom. And in memory of Tom, she set up this foundation, and there's been signs put up by, you know, local government organisations around the country, and we've put them up across our LGA, and so there's some very strong messages that go with the Hold My Hand. One is to hold your children's hand when they're crossing, particularly when they're under the age of 10. The second one is to slow down, because we know that when a car's going more than 50 kilometres an hour and it hits a pedestrian, there's a 90% chance that person will die, the pedestrian will die in the accident. So below 50 kilometres an hour, there's a very, you know, strong increase in chance of living after one of those accidents. And the third one is just educate your children about roads and that whole process. And we're actually doing the podcast in the library, and Michelle gave me a book about Tom and what happened in the accident, and it's in the library here, so it's available. I read it to my kids before I handed it into the library, and my eldest daughter Pearl often talks about Tom when we're crossing the road, and she remembers it. So there's some strong messages there. So I think it's a good one for the community to remember. It's for our community that live here, and also for visitors.
That's great. So when those signs go up, I will be making sure I'm standing next to you and reach across.
I'll make sure that we're very careful.
Good stuff. Look, got a little bit of time before we finish up. Some Mythbusters.
Yeah, a few more myths to bust. So there was one that was floating around that perhaps you were acting in self-interest when it talked about the Oven Mountain pumped hydroscope.
Yeah, I heard that. I think this is off the back of some angry face, me looking stern.
About their EIS.
About their EIS. And I did love this one, that the Mayor is just acting in self-interest, saying that this particular project's not up to snuff. Now, self-interest would indicate that I myself have a pumped hydro scheme that I could use.
Do you have one?
Look, they cost a lazy $2 to $3 billion to build. So I have to say I don't have that sort of change. So, no, that is a myth bust. It's certainly anything that I'm doing in this renewable space is for community interest, not self-interest there. So we'll count that one as busted.
We can call that busted, yeah.
We'll call that one busted. This probably isn't a myth, Todd, but there was a reference to the mall stage being called the Pringle Chip.
Which is appropriate in a way in its shape. So perhaps the Armidale Mall stage might be known as the Pringle Chip going forward.
I think that's a good thing, the Harbour Bridge is the coat hanger, the Pringle Chip, I can see them being mentioned in the same breath.
We don't have a big prawn.
Not yet. No, the big prawn looked a bit rude what it was doing to that building there at Ballina, and they had to take it down.
And
I guess the nearest big thing we've got is down at Moonby, the big chicken, and now they've cut the shrub down. It's exposed.
Yeah, and there is a big lamb with potatoes underneath it up at Guyra. That's true.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, look, they're probably the key myths, I guess.
Haven't heard any more myths, so maybe, encourage anyone to come out with your myths if you've got any.
I think so. Look, we might wrap this episode up. 26 minutes is about as good as we can get, so thanks for coming in, Todd. Thanks everyone for listening. If there's anything that you'd like us to cover or any issues, please holler. Please get in touch with council.
Great. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks. See you, Todd.